Welcome to Electrolysis Unplugged, an after-hours chat beyond the probe with Joanie and Stephanie. We're here to dive deep into the world of electrolysis, education, and all things hair removal.
Whether you're a seasoned professional or just curious about the art of permanent hair removal, we've got the insights, tips, and fun stories to keep you plugged in.
So grab your tools, take a seat, and let's get into it. This is Electrolysis Unplugged, brought to you by the Electrology Education Coalition.
Hi. Welcome back, everybody.
Hello.
Hi. All right.
You want to kick it off?
Sure. Yeah. So on Saturday, Stephanie and I spoke for the Texas Association of Professional Electrologists, right? You were there.
Yes.
That's great.
Yes.
It was a good day. I spoke nonstop for 3 hours. There was so hopefully didn't put anybody to sleep. But as we were going through, there was some questions and things that came through, and there was actually a lady that brought up something that I thought we could definitely use and discuss as we're kicking off today's hour. So there's a lot of different ways people were trained, and depending on the type of machine you learned on, who you learned from, the special techniques and all this and that. And so, we all end up having our quirky ways to do things, our favorite ways to do things. And what this lady brought up was that she would tell clients to wax before starting electrolysis so that then she could treat the hairs only in the anagen phase. Now, I've heard this before, and like I was telling Stephanie when we were discussing what to talk about today, I already profile the type of electrologist that does this. So it's like I feel like I know exactly how she was trained, what machine she's using, and all this and that. And so I just wanted to kick off today and kind of discuss why we would be doing something like that, for what purpose, and then how we feel about it. So do you want to start it off, Steph?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So let's talk about this from the perspective of the fact that I do both laser and electrolysis. Okay. So first, waxing is something that I would rarely, if ever, recommend to a patient. Okay. And the reason I say that is in most cases, as long as the person has enough melanin to their hair color, I will go with the laser treatment first, because then at least I'm getting some effective damage done to the follicle before I start their electrolysis. Okay. I also like this for the reason of when we laser an area, hairs that are just starting in their early anagen phase that have not yet breached the surface, as long as there's enough volume present, they will also be broken down just slightly in that area. So when they come through, they become an easier hair to treat in that space. And I'll go a step further as if I have a distorted hair, okay, a laser's light, I know we'll see all angles of a distorted hair, because what it's doing is it's literally going after melanin, right? And so if there is enough melanin present in that hair, enough volume and density present, right? So we're talking a lot of it, they're thick hairs and it's very dark or dark in color, then I'm going to have you go do a laser treatment. The only time instead I would say do a waxing session is if I had somebody that had body work, and I'm not talking in a hirsute based area. So we're talking like legs, back, chest, abdomen. And usually people assign male at birth in these spaces, not somebody assigned female at birth in these spaces. And I will start it with a wax in that session. And that would be like only if I had a lot of hair to try and manage on the very first clearance. Okay. But even then, I usually tell them to clip and I'll just go through it anyway. Okay. And that's more along the lines of I have a hard time encouraging temporary means of hair removal, like, and I should say physical, like, right? So, like, not shaving, not trimming, not nairing, right? I have a hard time with like a tweeze, a wax, a thread, a sugar in those spaces. And it's not because I haven't benefited from being able to wax my brows when I was younger and that kind of stuff, but more along the lines of like, I don't want to start our relationship with the very thing that I told you not to do. And that is a really difficult one for me. And I really feel as though in many cases, it sets somebody up with this precedence of like, why just one more time? Unless you were already waxing, why one more time? Right? And that's really what it is for me. So I would rather laser you, trim you, like shave you, and go after faster growing hairs and know that those telogen ones will fall out eventually. And do it that way than ever ripping a hair off.
So the whole reason why electrologists like her like to do the waxing first is because and you could put in there too that they would recommend sometimes to shave just to see which hairs are growing faster, right? So their goal is to catch the hair in an anagen phase. And if you're trying to catch the hair in an anagen phase, it's usually, for me, it's a couple reasons. One, let's say you are working blend or galvanic, and so you know that it's ideal for you to treat hair as an anagen. Um, Two, what I've actually read a lot in different books, especially older books, and what I've been taught back, kind of old thinking to me is that you can't treat intelligent hair. How many times have I heard that people say that treating intelligent hair does nothing and there's no point in it? And that's
Right.
just not true. I think that we need to update the way we uh, treat these areas. You could do, if you prefer to do blend, and sure, an anagen hair with more moisture is more ideal in these cases, but an electrologist, a modern electrologist, should be trained on all three modalities. And it's easy enough to kick it off with thermolysis to clear and then blend to get the regrowth,
Mhm.
because it's the same thing. But instead of sending your client to shave or to wax, like Stephanie was saying, starting off with a temporary method that you're trying to tell them not to do, you're at least going in with the solution first.
Mhm.
So I think it's kind of important to stop thinking about, first of all, intelligent hair is treatable. You just have to have the right modality, and you have to have the right depth of insertion. That's the biggest thing that I've seen. Second is, first of all, you should never tell a client to do something like wax if it's not something they were already doing on an area. Like, I've heard of electrologists telling people to shave their faces when they weren't shaving to begin with.
Yeah,
So things like that, like Stephanie was saying, you just don't want to be encouraging. So for me, it's like once they come into my office and we start with the electrolysis process, that's what we're doing, and and no matter what type of hair, no matter what area we're starting on.
absolutely. I mean, I every time I have someone that's like, what if I go do a wax right beforehand? I I question what if they have been compliant to what we've done so far, especially when we get into that area. And that's usually the same person that's like, um, they're a year and a half in, and you've been asking them like, "Hey, are you doing anything in between sessions that we didn't advise?" Right? It's this person that was like, "Well, I just didn't want to come in 3 weeks, so I tweezed or waxed at 3 weeks, and I extended my appointment to 6." What they're doing in their head is like, "At least I got it to antigen for you," and I'm saying like, "Why are we?" I like, yes, and I will say this as a galvanic operator, blend operator, as well as thermolysis, but like, do I love an antigen hair to work on in those spaces? Absolutely, right? Because
Yeah,
it's easy work,
of
right?
course it's better. Yeah.
But you can kill a hair. So, like, we used to say when I first came onto the industry, like, act. So anagen, catagen, telogen, you act in the right phase of growth, right? And I would say that, like, yes, obviously, the more components that are present within a follicle for us to destroy that bottom 2/3, the more successful that zap could be, like, in theory. But if your insertion's on point,
Hmm.
you've gauged the skin's reaction, you're getting a smooth extraction, we're golden. We
Mhm.
don't need to wait for this. So, if unless you are already doing a laser treatment in that area, and we're not worried about paradoxical hypertrichosis in that area, then let's go ahead and laser, one last time, right? So we can kick it all into the same, but you should already be in the antigen phase in that space. if you've been active with your laser. And if you haven't, then like, let's just move forward. I can get you booked right away and I can get to work. I don't need to wait 3 to 6 weeks for those hairs to come back in. That's
Yeah.
just so, okay, next. Okay. So one of the good questions that came through, and these kind of are going to come in, a couple of them are going to come in together. So the bigger question is when can we resume like you're doing genital electrolysis, and when can we resume friction-based activities like bike riding or whatever else, right? And then like when can you relieve yourself? Like, when can you go to the bathroom again? Okay. So we're going to talk about this in 2 parts in my brain. Okay. First, um, we're not gonna tell somebody to hold it in, okay? We're gonna just tell them to wash up afterwards, okay? That's the bigger one in my brain. I tell my clients shower within the hour. That's a big phrase I've said for a long time, because I don't wanna work on genitals when they're sweaty, um, or yucky, right? And so it's just easier and it's more hygienic, right? Friction-based activities, you're not gonna wanna go, like, hike a mountain, ride a bike, go kayaking. You're not gonna want to. I just zapped so bad that area. So I would give yourself probably 48 hours in that space. But we're not gonna hold in our bathroom stuff.
It's pretty common too, and I've done this. I do a lot of Brazilians and things like that. Once you've got the positioning right, they're pretty easy to get through and satisfying, honestly, because those hair follicles are so huge and the difference is big. So I've always liked doing bikinis and things like that.
Yeah.
But one thing with especially the labial area is that it tends to swell a lot. And it will feel like you're sitting on, 2 big balloons, and sometimes it's pretty sore.
Mm,
And so, part of the like doing the right consultation when you start off and explaining the do's and don'ts and working on it in an area that's a little bit more specific in the healing, that's one of those things, right? So I had a client once that went horseback riding after doing a bunch of Brazilian work, and then she of course regretted it instantly, but she was like, "Never again." I'm like, "What were you thinking?" So
Wow.
you just want to sit on an ice pack and she's hopping around on a horse. So yeah,
I can't even.
not ideal.
Oh my gosh.
People
Yeah,
don't think.
they
And so
don't.
you have to, and this was a client that had been with me a while. We were just starting a new area. And so sometimes like consultations for areas and aftercare happens over and over and over again. You do it the first time, but anytime I'm doing a large clearance or something specific like the labia, I'm like, remember, it's gonna swell and it's gonna look weird for a little while, and that's normal. You just have to go over it again and again and again.
Yeah. And most people don't necessarily like take a mirror to the area afterwards to see like how their skin is holding up. And so like they only are going to look with like a mirror or their phone or whatever to see when it feels like it's off. And then they're going to be like, "Oh my god, what's happening?" So like to give them that I don't know,
The
plan,
warning.
yeah,
Yeah, a
the
little
warning
warning.
of what's gonna go down, like, it's smart. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, but ice packs are amazing, zinc is so great down there,
Mhm.
out of all things, I know this sounds silly, my favorite cream is Calmoseptine cream because it's a zinc-based cream, it's thick, it's like a Desitin, but honestly, like, Boudreaux's butt paste or Desitin is amazing down there post-electrolysis, and it will recover it quickly because if it's good enough for a baby's bottom, it's good enough for yours.
Mhm.
So, and it's safe post electrolysis. Um, the next part, hold on, it was, what do I do when a client refuses to let their hair grow long enough for me? Joanie?
So, are we assuming that we can't even grab it with the tweezer?
That's what I'm assuming.
Well, I mean, there's not much to do. I would say
Right.
we would have to try to find creative ways to schedule.
Mm.
So maybe we can talk about, let's say if they work a 9 to 5 and they're in an office and they can't let it grow, then maybe your appointment's on a Friday night or like a Monday morning, or something like that. Is, you just have to find like creative ways to see when they're able to let it grow, just so that you're able to grab it. That might be one way. Usually once you've cleared the area and the hairs are kind of starting to come in a little thinner, it might alleviate some of that. COVID was great for that. The face masks,
I
people
know.
could just leave it alone, and that was great. It's like, maybe you just have a cold. And so
Yeah.
wear a face mask, to cover, and people don't look at you as weird anymore. So if you end up going to the store, running an errand or whatever it is, you can always just cover it up. But I think that the best way would be to try to figure out how to schedule the appointment to maximize the amount of hair growth and to have it fit in their life.
That's really a big part about this is we need to be able to let them know, like, there are expectations if you want to do a service like this that you do have to maintain, right?
Mhm,
I with when I'm talking to my clients, I ask them when's your aesthetic downtime, right?
mm,
So if you feel like you're going to be public facing on the weekends, right? You just like to go out and party and that kind of stuff, but at work you don't really care because you sit in a cubicle and nobody's coming near you, right?
mhm,
Then I would say during the like weekday is a better time to have hair. And you could stop shaving if you were shaving or whatever you're doing to it, like Sunday afternoon, so that by the time Monday rolls around, that's day 1, right? And then Tuesday, and that would be a Wednesday to Thursday client. In their chat, I think Pauline, posted that she had somebody that did this and they had shaved that morning. Okay, so, like, the ones that do that, okay, where we can have nothing to grab,
but
they
no trophy.
yeah, this is we don't get zapped. I
Yeah,
mean,
that's a cancellation fee. I mean, there's not much you can do. They should know better, because if you can't grab it, you can't do anything with it. So
and
there's no point.
I'm sure this happens to you, Joanie, and I'm sure this because it happens with the students too, and I'm like, I'm very, like, when patients are trying to, like, skirt around not having enough growth, my big thing is, like, if you're doing this procedure, you have to grow out the hair, right? Especially if you're
Mhm,
getting discounted electrolysis with a student, right? Um, but a lot of the ones that won't grow out their hair, they're the ones that I always notice the amount of pick marks that they went and plucked their hairs when they first felt them break the surface, okay? And they already have, like, scarring. And I
oh,
need
yeah.
them to understand that, like, your skin, I'm already gonna have a difficult time working through that scar tissue. I have to take ease with your treatment. And so I need them to understand that what they've been doing, that tweezing them, I can feel it, right? I can feel it. It's coming out. That's not what we're going for. We're going for angle of insertion. I need to see how your hair's coming out so I can see how to go in.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I guess Pauline says she was actually able to treat her still. So then it was not a super, super close shave, which is good. And then eventually, yes, like you said, that you have her down to shaving twice a week. She was shaving twice a day.
Mhm.
So yeah, I've had clients like that. They were shaving twice a day, and it's like you just have to figure out a time when maybe they can just be a hermit at home, but they
Mhm.
let it grow. And then they come to you, you clear it if possible, right? So if possible. And then after that, figure out a schedule that makes it so that they don't feel they have to touch it. And that client that I had was 3 times a week. So she couldn't let it go, but we cleared it. It was like a 2.5 hour session, just cleared all the hair off her face. And then she came back in just a few days later, and I didn't do much. Those appointments 3 times a week were very short, but at least it kept her hands off her face.
Right. And that's ultimately I'm trying to get that to that point with those people. It's like you sit there and you're like, you wanna start this, but you have to unfortunately
To
pay a little
commit.
in.
Yeah,
You have to
you have
commit.
to commit. Yeah.
Uh, you had her I'm sorry, just reading. Had her book on Sundays at the start so she could shave on Friday morning. That's
Mhm.
awesome. That's
Yeah.
amazing. And the thing is like, that's giving somebody an ability to obtain something that is otherwise difficult, right?
Mhm.
I mean, none of us on this call want to grow out facial hair in front of people, right? I do
No.
laugh whenever one comes in and I'm like, see, even I'll just get one every once in a while, right? And you're just like, neat. But like, I need them to understand that I wasn't a hairless person also. And the only reason this is coming in is when I talk about hormone shifts, right? Like that's what we're doing. Other than that, because it's my line of work, I can't imagine being someone that isn't a zapper, um, that would be so eager to
Mhm.
show people their hair problem.
Yeah.
So, and I'm like, use those masks. If you don't feel well, you don't feel well. Um, so allergy season, you have
Yeah.
asthma, I don't care. I found out I have allergies. Okay, wear a mask, right? That's what we're doing. Um, ooh, okay, this one was a good one. What do I do when there's a lot of debris on their skin, especially around the hair follicle? So, I mean, really, it comes down to once the patient is taking good care of their skin, debris is less, right?
Mhm.
Because they're taking care of their skin, it's hydrated. I am in a state where I can do anaphoresis, so I do a little bit of anaphoresis beforehand just to help like hydrate and get the crust off there, right? So like that's another part of it. But I mean, for me, that's pretty much what I do. So,
Well, and like I've had some issues with some clients. We had one person that was she used to ride her bike everywhere.
mm,
And with the makeup and the dirt from the road, I mean, you would wipe off the face and it was just black.
right.
And so I remember, in the beginning kind of having to teach her how to take care of her face. And so a lot of it was like, I'd like you to just get some wet wipes, and when you get to work, I need you to, you know, wipe your face. You need to clean it more often because that stuff builds up in your pores. So it was pretty bad. And another thing is I have the gauze that are kind of rough, right? So
Mm-hmm.
those are a little bit exfoliating. So, and I have like a milk cleanser, or sometimes I use the cucumber toner from the Gala line, right? And so
Yeah.
I will do almost like a mini facial just to kind of clean off the skin where, you use the like lots of water on the gauze to kind of get up some of the stuff. The makeup remover, scrubbing it in and then using the gauze to even exfoliate. And that becomes part of the session in this example, but it's like just using the gauze with the skin disinfectant is not enough.
No.
And this could be people that come into your session with, an inch of makeup on because they're coming
Yeah.
straight from work, they're hiding the hair growth. So sometimes you just kind of have to sit there and do like a mini like cleansing facial just to be able to get all that stuff off before you can even start. So it's a good way to, I think, almost like sales pitch some of your products. So if you have skin cleansers and different types of like exfoliants, we've sold like the granule exfoliators. So clients like this, I said, this is what you need to buy. It's part of your skincare, and so now you're selling a product. So it's not that big of a deal, but it's part teaching and then part using the right products and getting into the correct habits and everything like that.
Absolutely. Pauline had a question. Hold on one second here. I have a question when you get to it. Is it bad to do cataphoresis too high? Hannah recently treated a face and then did a few on my legs and still had the machine set to the legs cataphoresis. And it was 1.5, but for the first time ever, it worked amazing on me and no redness after 2-hour treatment. I want to be more aggressive with it on my clients, but I don't want to hurt anyone. So d- I I will go. Do you want to answer first, and then I can go with
Go
what
ahead.
I.
Go ahead. Go for it.
Okay, so 1.5 is not high when it comes to body work. So when we talk about anaphoresis and cataphoresis, there are ranges that you have to stick within as a suggestion, but you are not going to injure someone. I will say, and this is kind of an interesting. So anaphoresis. So when we're talking about using cataphoresis to break down excessive sweat is done incredibly high. And I had one of my students was trying it on her hands because she had seen it online, and I was like, absolutely, you can use the machine for it. But I will say that it's unstudied enough to that I wouldn't necessarily teach it, right? Um, and like she was able to get her hands to stop sweating to the point where she was able to slide on gloves very quickly. And she had been like constantly sweating when that kind of stuff happened. And she was sitting closer to 2 MA in those spaces. And if you look, your machine can go quite high with the Apolis. with your cataphoresis levels and your electrolysis levels. So there, I would say test what your limit is, right? And then work within that, and then test what your patient's limit is. Most of my face patients, I'm usually right around about 75 milliamperes for cataphoresis. For my bodywork patients, I'm like usually 1.5 to 1.75.
Yeah, I mean, the rule of thumb with cataphoresis is, especially with the presets on the machines, it never really goes that high that it's dangerous. And so it's more of a, you might feel tingling, you might feel nothing at all. It shouldn't hurt.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're rolling on the face and it's stinging too much, then your level's too high. If they're not feeling anything, you can bring it up for sure. It's only going to go. I wonder, I don't know if it's 1.99 or 2.99 that it maxes at. I
I think it's
forget.
2. I think it's just 2.
So 1.99.
Yeah.
So it's not even going to go that high. Not much is going to happen. At this point, you would have to cataphorese for like 30 minutes to do some sort of tissue damage. So the minute that you're doing it, no big deal. If you're not feeling it, go ahead and crank it up. It's not going to do much there. Um, on a side note, that taste that you have in the mouth, I still see the debates all the time, and it has nothing to do with metal in the mouth.
Mm-mm.
And so sometimes people always think that it's metal in the mouth. It's not. It's the electricity interacting with your taste buds. You're tasting electricity. So a little different, kind of a fun side thing.
And then you had a secondary, is 1.5 okay on your face? Yeah. I mean, if your body can handle it, do it.
Yeah.
I can handle quite a bit of galvanic thrown at me. And I actually find it quite relaxing. I don't know, you guys, I know that this sounds silly, but I think that like the tingle of a battery feels good. And so I don't know why, but that's like, it's just relaxing to me. So the same kind of applies here. If you can handle it, your skin's looking good, do it. But also as you're moving into other people, see what their tolerance is for the milliamperes. Because it's once those MAs go like, and you're peeling them from the ceiling, it's very difficult.
I'm with you there too. Like I've never minded the tingling.
Oh, it's so nice.
I feel like it's working. It's doing more stuff. I'm like, yeah, make it work. But some people, you get around like the ankle bone, around the knee, and you're peeling them off the ceiling. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, that doesn't hurt, But yeah, some people can't handle it much, and so you have to bring it almost down to 0, and that's fine. You do what you can.
Last year, one of my students has scoliosis and she has a rod down her back, and it was not a good move for her. We did like at 0.25 MA, and pew, it was just like, oh, sorry. But like,
This is where we started incorporating high frequency, the Tesla high frequency machine for aftercare, and that's helped with a lot of different cases.
oh, okay, cool. There's a lot to cataphoresis. And I didn't do it for most of my practice. In fact, in 2016, when we brought Apples into our practice, that was the first time I started doing cataphoresis. Even though I had it on my machine, I didn't know what I could do with it. And it is such a great recovery. It's such a great way for that calming to happen. It's good to keep the bacteria at bay, and our patients are so tempted to go and touch their face after we've cleaned it, like of hair. And so if I could just kind of like reduce the chance of you kind of putting bacteria in that area by recovery, it's a good idea. Today, we want to shine some light on some of our amazing partners who are helping shape the future of electrology education, services, distribution, and so much more. We're thrilled to have such amazing partners and supporters. Whether you're just starting out or a seasoned professional, these vendors and schools have what you need to succeed. The North American distributor of ballet needles and Instantronics is none other than Synoptic Products. Every electrologist knows that precision matters. Ballet needles are designed for just that, offering unparalleled accuracy and comfort for both the practitioner and the patient. Instantronics is known for the smoothest hair removal experience, and distributors who are enthusiastically moving towards innovative experiences with their new ownership under Dr. Sarah Paisner, Instantronics, formerly known as Instantron, is making strides
towards innovative experiences in electrology epilators. You can ensure that your practice not only remains clean, safe, and compliant, but on the leading edge of technology and innovation, a must-have for every electrology clinic. Visit synopticproducts.com to learn more. Looking for education in the middle of it all? Head over to the Midwest United States to Illinois Dedicated Electrology Academy. The idea is building strong foundations for future electrologists. Their small class sizes, expert instructors, and modern facilities make IDEA a top choice for students seeking high-quality education. Your career in electrology starts here. Welcome to idea.com. That is welcome to idea.com.
Hey there, electrologists. My name is Hazel Bloom. I'm a life coach for the LGBTQIA+ community and its allies. As a trans woman, I have done the hard work and introspection to figure out who I am, what I want from life, and how to live authentically as myself. These are universal skills that I can teach you and help you gain the confidence to thrive. Also, I know that the conversations with clients on the table can get a bit intense and beyond the scope of electrology, so I'd invite you to refer them to me so they can get the support they need through a tough time instead of taking that burden on yourself. I'm also available as a resource for you if you just need some assistance figuring out how to help a client or to ask any questions. Whatever you need, I can help. My website is kiwifruitcoaching.com, or you can email me directly, hazel@kiwifruitcoaching.com.
Thanks for tuning in to Electrolysis Unplugged. Be sure to check out our amazing sponsors for the best in electrology tools, training, technology, and so much more. Now, back to the show.
What does it mean? Okay, so these next couple questions actually go together. So when Joanie and I saw them, we were like, those are all going to go back to back. What does it mean when the needle gets stuck in the skin a little bit?
It means you are cooking the egg on the skillet.
Roasting them. If there is skin left on that filament, if the filament won't come out of the skin, you did too much. Okay. Yeah. In those spaces, what I tell, and this is probably because I was a blend operator first, right? And really did until 2016, really didn't bring much thermolysis into my life. Okay. It wasn't until I had a machine that was a little bit faster that I would write it in. But like it was until that point that I just did not realize that my patients had, I want to say, like, they didn't understand that like high didn't necessarily high meant more dead, right? And it was all about balancing energy. And so when I think about like your filament gets stuck in the skin or you have skin stuck in your filament, it is because you were trying to crank it up for the patient, right? That's when the person's like, put it to 11. I want him dead. And we're like going over the machine and turning him up, right? Instead, I'm an operator, because I'm a blend operator first, I increase my time before my intensity. I'd rather cook you longer at lower, as long as it's efficient, than to fry you fast, because that recovery is going to take forever. But when I say longer, I'm not talking like seconds. I'm talking like longer, like a half a second versus 1.15. Yeah. Does that make sense? So, and that's how I usually will navigate those. Well, that doesn't really happen, but like navigate those spaces. And that's what I tell you guys as students too. I'm like, do not turn it all the way up. In fact, today in class, I brought 2 of my students over to the Appalachia, and I just wanted you to see what your machine can put the ELs at and understand that does not mean that's what you should be doing, right? And we were able to get to like, in some of those spaces, like up to like 47,000. Wow. I mean, oh my God, could you imagine? I don't even know if your cord would withstand that, would it? I doubt it.
I mean, I don't know. I've never really, I guess you would have to do that on an egg test, see if you want to blow through a cord for the sake of science.
Not really. Like, so that's one part of it. The next part, so like that second part was like, what causes the debris on the tip of the probe. Okay. So, I'll let you lead. What causes the debris on the tip of the probe?
Well, that's when you're cooking the tissue right onto the probe. So instead of your spatula getting stuck on the skillet, you're just lifting off the spatula with the skillet stuff on top of it, right? So you've got the egg stuck on the spatula. Pretty much. I mean, you kind of already said it. This happens mainly in thermolysis, and it happens because your intensity is too high. And so anytime we run into an issue like that, we start to have to troubleshoot. We need to somehow mellow out the intensity. Sometimes this happens because you feel like you need that much power, or you're increasing it because, you're under pressure from your client or whatever it is. But sometimes I see it a lot when people use probes that are too small for intensities that are too high or intensities that are high because maybe that's necessary, but your probe is too small because of whatever reason. You're not choosing the right size probe because that reduces the surface area, concentrates the energy, right? And so that's another kind of facet to this. When you're trying to troubleshoot, how can I reduce the debris stuck on the probe getting stuck in the follicle? Anything like that, increasing the time, like you said, is a great way to do that because the more time, the mellower the intensity will be. But sometimes it could be increasing surface area on my probe.
Mm,
So going for a probe that is more exposed, less Teflon insulation on it, or going for a probe that's just bigger size. And so you could keep the setting the same, but increase the surface area of your probe. And that can also be another way to fix it.
absolutely. There's nothing to add there. Because the thing is like when, like, if you are seeing that, if you're seeing it stuck on the probe or stuck on the, stuck in the person, we need to consider probe size, probe make, okay,
Mhm.
energy levels, and then timing. Those are the things that are like the most um biggest components about that. That's it. And
So,
so it's
question
happened.
for you, Steph.
Mhm.
What would be the blend or galvanic equivalent? What
For
about like the lye frothing out of the follicle? Would
well,
that be the equivalent? Like, so tell me what equivalent you would have.
so okay, equivalent could be live frothing out. I will say, uh, what I found with doing fast blend,
Mhm.
especially if okay, so when I'm doing fast blend, I already have the moisture present, okay? Because I'm trying to do that action really quickly, okay? But if the moisture isn't there, I will lead with my thermolysis, create the steam that's there, right? And then that lye lags and it creates less of a bubble, right? But in doing so, if I'm seeing bubbles come up, there's a couple different things I need to consider. One, I did not do enough to prep the skin, okay? Because that follicle it's getting rid of the debris that's in there, okay?
Mhm.
And that gas is pushing up and that's making those bubbles come out. Two, if I have those bubbles coming up, my balance of my MA to my time is not correct.
Mhm.
It needs to be not frothing out, and we used to talk about, like, "Ooh, I can see the bubbles," and I remember that early on, and I was so excited whenever I could see the bubbles. But then what I also noticed whenever I could see the bubbles is that it took longer for my patient to recover, okay?
Well, yeah, because the lie's corroding the top of the skin.
Exactly, and I wasn't doing cataphoresis to neutralize it, right?
Sure.
And so, when we think about those things, nowadays, if you see bubbles coming out, you have overworked what you need to do. That's too much for what we need. You need very little lye to really get it to work. And in many cases, say for example, you know that the lye that you gave it was the right like for that hair. It even sometimes takes a couple seconds extra to get that hair to come out. So you might come back and you're like, yeah, I'm gonna let that sit for a second and then just test it and see if it slides. If it slides, then you're good to go. Right. Now, so when we talk about two-hand technique versus one-hand technique, I can do both. I usually do two-hand technique on my non-dominant side. I do one-hand technique on my dominant side. I am not a two-hand technique person that will keep my filament in as a blend operator and test the hair. Okay. And the reason
Progressive epilation, as they call it.
I know, I'm like, so when they call it progressive epilation, let's talk about this. I have not met in all of the years of doing blend, an operator that does that and keeps their forceps on there that isn't slowly plucking out the hair.
Mm.
Okay. Every time you test. The other thing is, if it's not coming out, okay, that is not because you weren't using enough energy. That's because you weren't where your target is. I say this to my students all the time. You got an entire bullseye board. You threw that dart everywhere but the bullseye. Okay. And so you need to start going, okay, if it's not extracting, I already know what this hair needed, right? I know that I can get that out with 40 UL, and which is just Unitali is created by Hingle to quantify that, right? So it's like it's not actually like there's no such thing as a unit, right?
No.
Not like a measure. What they're saying is like time plus intensity. Okay. So if that's happening, I now know that I need to be there and redoing my insertion, not increasing my MA. So that's kind of where I go with that. And you're gonna see, instead of us seeing something that's like over treatment immediately, it's usually going to be days after that your skin's just not recovering because you basically had lye sitting on the surface around that and it's taking a while to heal.
Hmm.
So, to follow up with that, the other two questions that we had was talking about the crackling sound versus the bacon sound. So this is one of the ones that like when you're working towards the ear on somebody, they're like, "Ooh, I heard a noise. I feel like it's working today." Right? So let's talk about that. Joanie, you go first. When you're hearing crackling versus bacon.
Well, if you're hearing the little psh, psh noise when you're pressing on the foot pedal, that is usually an indication that your intensity is up too high. It's the same as debris on the probe, and it's the same as probe getting stuck in the follicle. It's not really a good thing. Now,
Mhm.
my rule of thumb, if it happens once or twice, no big deal. That's just kind of how it was. If
Mhm.
every insertion, you're you're hearing that blowout, that's what it's called. It's called the
Mhm.
blowout. Then you're over treating. Not just that, but with thermolysis specifically, a blowout is where the temperature inside the follicle gets so hot so fast that
Mhm.
you're actually boiling the tissues. You're boiling the water. And turns out that steam, which is created, which is that psh noise, the
Mhm.
steam that is created is actually a really bad conductor of electrical current. And so your perfect little teardrop shape that you're trying to create cannot get as wide and as tall as you're really needing it to be. It stunts the ability of the power or the intensity to spread into the follicle.
Mhm.
So it's actually counterproductive to what you're trying to do. So yeah, okay, maybe you've detached the root of the hair,
Mhm.
but the walls of the follicle are mostly left untreated. And so you'll see more regrowth. It's about balancing. And Stephanie, you say this all the time. It's about balancing your time and your intensity.
Mhm.
Because our goal is not to just to get the hair out. It's you have to think a little bit beyond that. If you want to be a really good electrologist, you really have to think about the how that current spreads in the follicle and where you're trying to get it to go. All that imagining of what the follicle looks like and where your current reaches. So you have to go, a little bit beyond what you think it is, which is just the hair came out, so therefore it's done, right? It's
Mhm.
not just that.
No. And like when when people ask me about like crackling bacon sound, I mean like you have steam and you have oil in that area, right?
Yeah.
They're gonna make those noises when they get cooked real quick, right? But the fact is like well, something that's seared doesn't necessarily like you're in there searing the edges. You're not treating the edges. You just basically temporarily injured it. You didn't really do any sizable damage. So if I'm
Mhm.
hearing that, like Joanie said, like I don't if it's one or two, I'm gonna come across a couple problematic hairs, right? Um, but if I'm hearing it over and over, then I need to go back to my machine. Because it's not that heat built over time is very difficult to recover from. And that's usually when you're seeing like long-term redness day. That's usually when you start seeing um, like the not pustules, but like little, basically like water blisters in the area. It's because you overdid it. And so it really comes back to go with what like your first initial thought of that energy is. And I will usually say, if you're looking at a hair, we're gonna go within like on a silhouette tone, it's like within 5, right? On an Apple's, it's more like within 100. Okay, so like 50 on either side of what I expected. If I'm having to get out of that, then I'm improperly assessed what I needed to do, right? So if I thought that I was going to go at that for 250 EL, but I end up getting up to 350, I wasn't actually going after a 250 EL hair. I was going after a 350. But as I was getting up there, I started hearing that I'm going to bring that energy back down. I'm going to increase my time, right? So I can still get to that 350 without overworking the tissue. Okay. What does it mean when I insert the probe and the skin dimples and then goes flat?
You have poked through the bottom or the side,
Or the side? Yeah.
right? So this was the topic of my second lecture on Saturday. So when, reading the skin is such an important skill to develop when you're doing an insertion, and doing electrolysis is an art really, and it's, something that you have to have a slow enough insertion that you're able to read the skin at every moment, right? And that's what makes a truly good electrologist. Honestly, the insertion is going to be the most important part. If you are, first of all, the dimple, because the probes are rounded at the tip, when you're hitting either the bottom of the follicle or the side of the follicle, you're hitting a wall, right?
Mhm.
Now, your skin will, the probe won't poke through that wall right away. It's not a needle.
Mhm.
And so there's going to be a slight tell from the outside. Honestly, from a teacher's perspective, I can see a bad insertion from a mile away. It's actually pretty easy to spot if somebody's poking, if somebody's off, if somebody went through,
Mhm.
just because you know how to read it, even if I'm not the one doing the insertion.
Mhm.
They just have to kind of slow down, honestly. And if you, as you're pushing onto with the probe, if the probe's not bending and the skin is still kind of flexing, eventually you're going to poke through. As soon as you do, everything's going to bounce right back to neutral. And
Mhm.
so